Hello, and a very warm welcome to you all. Firstly, a big thank you to the many people who have contacted me with beautiful comments, support and encouragement in connection with my first embroidery and video, Lily and Elsie. This video tells the story of Bill, a Canadian pilot in the Second World War who befriended 3 generations of my family. He was born in December 1919 and grew up on the Saskatchewan prairies of Canada. At the age of 5, he moved with his family to Ingersoll in Ontario. Initially, he was a cattle dealer and butcher, but later became an auctioneer. Bill was also an artist with a strong Christian faith and who, like my grandfather, told wonderful stories with great humour and wit. My grandfather, George, was born in January 1895 in Leicestershire, making him a whole generation older than Bill. At 17, George took himself off to Wigston Barracks and then after his training joined the 20th Hussars and later transferred to the East Lancashire Regiment, where he served with the infantry and the cavalry. He received the Mons Medal and 1914 Star, and for bravery on the field he was awarded the Military Medal. While in the Royal Flying Corps, he was also mentioned in dispatches. After the First World War, George returned to civilian life with a permanent commission to the Royal Flying Corps and continued his training all over the UK. In September 1939, he was on holiday with his family in Skegness when the war broke out. George was 45 and was called up in the first week. He was assigned to security on the base at Duxford because of his vast experience. However, George found this work very stressful and didn't much enjoy it, so he applied to the Royal Air Force, where he passed a rigorous medical test before flying aeroplanes around the country. George and Bill met in the RAF. Bill was George's junior by nearly 25 years, but they soon became good friends and often flew together. Of the many stories and anecdotes that my grandfather and Bill told, there are 2 that stand out in my memory. The first is from Bill's perspective. When we were at Rochford Aerodrome near Southend-on-Sea, in going from the Aerodrome to the officers' mess, it was necessary to go through the village of Rochford. There was an army lieutenant on the station who was in charge of ground defences at the aerodrome. His name was William, and he always travelled by motorbike. On occasions, I would ride in George's Ford car, and if we happened to leave the aerodrome at the same time as William, he would go ahead on his bike to the main intersection in the village and then park his bike, stop all the traffic and stand to attention and salute. As George was older than I, he would get into the back of the car and take the salute as we went through. Then the natives would be straining to see who the important dignitary was. Remarks from people speculated that it could be Montgomery or even the King in the back of the car. But of course it was George. This account is from George's perspective, but largely using Bill's words. On the 6th of June 1944, Bill and I were stationed at Southend-on-Sea and attached to the aerodrome at Rochford. The day before, we had seen one side of the dual carriageway filled bumper to bumper with military vehicles on a 30-mile stretch from the south-east to London. At the time, we didn't know what was happening, but realised that something was. I had a bad knee, so had been given an appointment to see a specialist who was stationed at another aerodrome west of London. I asked Bill if he would fly me to the appointment. So on the 5th of June, we set off. We had to go around London, as at the time it was an offence to fly over it. We found the place and landed the Miles Martinet in the late afternoon and headed off to the officers' mess, which turned out to be one of the Rothschilds' homes, where we stayed for the night. The next morning I reported to the doctor for my appointment, but was greeted with, "What the are you doing here? This is D-Day." I hurried back to where Bill was waiting and told him the news, saying to him, "We'd better get out of here." We decided to leave and grabbed our gear and headed for the aircraft. This aerodrome was the only one I had seen with a wire fence all around it. This particular plane was the worst to get into the air. Bill taxied back as far as he could to get the best position and wind. It was supposed to lift at 85 miles an hour, but it was still on the ground at that speed, and we were getting uncomfortably close to the barbed wire. At the last minute, Bill bounced the plane over the fence. As we staggered into the air, I shouted to Bill, "Oh, boy!" Once in the air, we decided as it was D-Day, we would fly over London, thinking everyone would be too busy to report us. And no one did. We flew right down the Thames. I decided to commemorate this event by embroidering a Miles Martinet aeroplane. My earliest memory of my grandfather is about him telling me these types of stories. One of his favourites was this miracle. After the war, I had lost contact with Bill and wanted to find him. So I wrote on the outside of an envelope, "Bill Hawkins, RAF, Canada, find him." And the letter did. It both astounded him and delighted him. George and Bill kept in contact until George died in 1975, where sadly the connection with Bill was lost to our family. Then in the autumn of 1982, my mother and aunt went out from the UK to Heathcote in Ontario to visit their sister who was recovering from cancer. It was on this trip that a second miracle occurred. One day the three sisters were walking through the Greens store in Heathcote talking about their father when a man suddenly approached them and said, "I know who you are talking about. I am Bill Hawkins and I flew with your father." It was an incredible miracle, as Ingersoll and Heathcote are about 130 miles apart. It wasn't as if Bill was local. From that day on, my mother kept in contact with Bill, writing each year and exchanging cards at Christmas. Bill would always send one of his pen and ink cards and add various anecdotes in each one. When my mother died in 1991, I kept up the contact, and Bill and I wrote to one another a couple of times a year. In spring 1994, I told Bill that I had become engaged, and then, out of the blue, he phoned me from Canada just to say congratulations. He said, "It's the least I can do for my friend's granddaughter." He became quite fatherly. It was very special to have that connection, and one I know my grandfather would have been delighted with. Bill died on the 10th of April 2002. His son, Bill Jr, also kept in contact for a few years afterwards. After his father's death, Bill Jr wrote to me, "Dad was as proud of you as of his own grandchildren, and your wedding picture still graces the wall in his office." In an email in 2003, he signed off by saying, "Take care and thank you for being one of my father's many friends in life. I am sure that he and your grandfather have shared a few stories lately. I am sure they have." Please could I invite you to subscribe to my channel, to like and link my videos, and to add your comments below. On Etsy and Facebook you will also find a variety of my embroideries. God bless you and thank you for listening. Until the next time.